Good morning. I'm Lauren LaFlamme with Bearing Insurance, and welcome to our 2025 Human Resources Year in Review webinar. Presenting today is Jamie Hasty from SESCO Management Consultants, and we've partnered with SESCO for many years, and since 1945, SESCO has provided human resources and employee relations consulting services across the United States. If you're a client of ours, we encourage you to take advantage of your access to SESCO, and each client is available for phone and email support from SESCO at our cost. You can ask your insurance advisor how to get connected. This webinar is being recorded, and I'll share the recording with everyone registered once it ends. Please feel free to submit your questions in the chat or the Q&A feature, as we'll be answering questions at the end of the webinar. With that, I'll turn it over to Jamie Hasty, Vice President of SESCO Management Consultants.
Thanks, Lauren. Good morning, everybody. It's nice to be back for our last webinar of 2025. We'll typically schedule those moving forward on a quarterly basis for 26, but thought it would be really timely to kind of just do a 2025 HR year-end review, what we learned, compliance culture, some things that are changing on a nationwide basis. Remember, SESCO does have clients nationwide in all industries. So there may be some things where we're talking about different states. So just keep that in mind. But kind of our game plan for today, we'll look at some key developments from federal and states. Typically we are rolling into our legislative session on a state level that generally begins January for most states and can run through February, sometimes even March, depending on the state that you're operating your business in. So there are some things already kind of in motion, especially here in Virginia, things that we're already keeping our eyes on for 2026. So we'll look at some of the impactful rules, guidance, that sort of thing. We'll talk a little bit about some workplace trends, some priorities for 26, and then certainly we can do a Q&A on anything else that you all have on your minds that you like to cover today. So 2025 on a federal basis wasn't too rocky. I mean, certainly there are always things that get shaken up when we have changes in leadership within various agencies, right? So the biggest one, and we've talked about it a lot in the past, whether it's federal and or state, is wage and hour compliance. Wage and hour is your number one financial liability. Exempt, non-exempt, on-call, meal periods, travel time, deductions from wages, final paychecks, commissions, bonuses, overtime on those. If you are paying somebody hourly plus overtime and they're getting a bonus or a commission. On the state side, a lot of states are implementing what we call wage theft and pay frequency laws. So I'm going to use Virginia here for an example. This is not new for Virginia. Virginia and the Virginia Wage Payment Act specifies how frequently, how regularly employees must be paid. Salaried individuals have to be paid no less than one time per month, as well as hourly or salaried non-exempt have to be paid no less than twice per month. Okay, that's not new. That's been in the regulation for many years, right? So with these wage theft laws, with some of the changing pay frequency laws, what's really important is that you are paying very close attention to how often our payroll is being run. Some people do weekly, some people do biweekly, some people do semi-monthly. They all have their pros and cons, right? But the biggest thing, especially when I'm talking about hourly plus overtime, is that the overtime is paid correctly in the pay period in which it was earned. So if you are doing a semi-monthly payroll, that can convolute things, especially from an overtime calculation. Why? Because a semi-monthly payroll typically runs at least 1 month behind, okay, for the pay period that you're paying. So You want to keep those things in mind. Other aspects that we've talked about in the past that was kind of back and forth a little bit in 25 as it relates to independent contractor classifications. I feel like I've talked about this ad nauseum in many areas, but in 2024, Department of Labor came out and changed the rules surrounding the independent contractor just from the DOL perspective. Remember, there are three aspects of independent contractors. So you have your IRS 20-factor test, then you have a DOL, used to be 6, then it was 7, now we're back to 6-factor test, which very does mirror similarly the IRS requirements. And then many states have what we call a state ABC test. So they have their own requirements. Moral of the story is, it is in many scenarios very difficult to 1099 somebody. In 9 out of 10 cases, when I dig into that conversation with clients, talking about control, schedule, fees, how are they being invoiced? How are that? What dates are they being paid? Are they being paid on the same day that you're running payroll? That's a problem. Are they bringing their own tools and equipment? Do they have their own LLC or S corp or EIN number? Are they invoicing you? Did they negotiate their rates? Are you controlling how and when the work is done? Do they have the ability to make a profit? Do they have the ability to work for other people? All of these things matter when we're talking about a 1099. And that's why when we talk about wage and hour compliance, having somebody misclassified as a contractor when they really should be a W-2 is a significant financial liability, not just from the tax perspective, but from a minimum wage, overtime, Affordable Care Act. If you are an ALE, an applicable large employer, then you would have penalties for not offering them insurance. Then you could have workers' comp, tax liability as well. So wage and hour compliance will always be a primary focus in 2025, in 2026, and future years. Why? Because when you get audited by the Department of Labor, they don't just look at one person that filed the complaint or anonymously filed the complaint. They are looking at everything. If you are a business that has multiple locations, maybe you have multiple locations spread throughout the Southeast or in different states. What they find in one, they will then expand it and open it up to all of your other locations. They run their numbers in terms of misclassification, mispayment, back wage liability, and that number automatically doubles underneath liquidated damages. Okay, so wage and hour is big. I don't mean to scare you by that, but if you have not had a wage and hour compliance assessment done of your organization, that should be something you should consider moving into 2026. You want to make sure that the salary people can be salary, that the hourly people are clocking in, clocking out. You can have salaried non-exempt. Just because I pay somebody on salary does not mean that they are exempt from overtime. There are white collar exemption rules and tests surrounding who can be considered exempt from overtime. Depending on your industry, if you're healthcare, if you're automotive, if you're a retail, there are partial exemptions we can apply, but those can get a little sticky as well. So you want to make sure that your payroll is compliant. One of the other big things that we saw in 25 was obviously the expansion of paid leave provisions. So Illinois, Minnesota, Oregon, they all have their new paid leave provisions. If you were in Maryland, because we may have some Maryland folks on the call with us today, their paid family leave, which was supposed to take effect in 26, is now being delayed until 27. There is bills being introduced right now prior to Virginia General Assembly to expand a paid sick leave requirement of all employers in Virginia, not just the healthcare workers, which is how the law is currently written, but all employers. And that would also apply to seasonal and part-time employees as well. So we're closely monitoring that for 26 to see what happens in General Assembly. However, it is likely to pass. It is likely to pass with the incoming administration. Okay. A big other push too, and it's something that I've shared in the past, are what we call these pay transparency laws, right? Especially again, if you were operating locations in various states, there are pay transparency laws that require us to post in the job posting on Indeed, on ZipRecruiter, or wherever you're posting these jobs, what the compensation range for that position is. Now, if I look back to recruitment and retention, just trends that have been going on since 22, 23, and to current, most organizations are doing this anyways. Why? Because when you're looking at a recruitment effort, it's easier and better to get individuals that closely align to the wage range that you are paying for that position when they apply. You may be posting a manager position and it's only going to pay 65 to 75,000. And let's say that pay range is not listed in the job posting. Well, I may get a, really, really awesome qualified individuals that I fall in love with, but they're looking for $90,000 to $100,000, right? So the concept here is in some states it's now required. Maryland, Virginia is not one of them. North Carolina is not one of them. Typically, your more northern and west coast states are doing that. But it is something that we will likely see become a trend in almost all states over the next few years. So this also is in conjunction with the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They have kind of given us some signals that they plan to expand pay data reporting when you file that EEO-1. They were going to ask for it, then they kind of took that aspect back, and now they're signaling that we're going to go back into that. So pay transparency laws are something that we should be also keeping our eyes and ears peeled on. Now, lots of chatter throughout the year over the non-compete reforms. The FTC rolled out a universal, anti-non-compete. Then that's been challenged in litigation. But remember, each state can also implement their own non-compete. I'm going to use Virginia as an example. Okay. Virginia has non-compete laws that have been on the books for many years. Okay. If you made over a certain dollar amount threshold, I don't care what industry you were in, then you could not be forced as a condition of employment to sign a non-compete. Those non-competes were unenforceable. And the threshold most recently was about 75, 80,000. Okay. Now, what Virginia did in 25 was, through the latest General Assembly in 25, they revised the language of their non-compete law to state that any employee that is considered non-exempt, could be salaried non-exempt, could be hourly non-exempt, cannot be held to a non-compete. So if you are an organization that is using a non-compete, which is different from a non-solicitation, non-disclosure, okay, you should have those things reviewed for compliance, both from your procedural aspect, but also making sure that the non-compete, if you are going to use it for high earners appropriately, based off of your industry, it needs to be written and reviewed by an employment attorney or somebody like SESCO. Okay. We'll also see more states roll out non-compete revisions. I've got clients in Florida. I was just talking with them yesterday about Florida's Choice Act, which deals with non-competes and certain thresholds. Anybody making under 175,000 cannot be required to sign a non-compete. So, those states or laws will always differ. Now, DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, I know that's typically a buzzword, but really what DEI is anti-discrimination. Think Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, okay? So remember that best practice, you should be doing annual harassment training with all of your managers, all of your employees. That's nothing new. But the EEOC is really digging into how organizations are using AI, and making sure that it is fair, consistent, and is not violating any sort of anti-discrimination law. Whether that be in recruitment, whether that be in retention, performance regulations, all of those things. So under the previous federal administration, the EEOC had issued guidelines specifically surrounding AI, how you can use it, algorithms, checks and balances, and how that ties back into, all of the employment protection laws on the books, Title VII, Family Medical Leave, Americans with Disabilities Act, all of these things. And then with the new administration that came in, they kind of rescinded that guidance, but they are working on revised guidance. Okay. We use AI in so many ways. Let's work smarter, not harder. It's great, all of the things, right? But it does have its limitations. So we need to make sure that any sort of culling of data, any sort of, review or scan where perhaps you're using it through your recruitment efforts and it's kind of pulling and culling resumes that they want that kind of match your stuff. You need a check and balance there, okay? Because AI is great, but AI is not perfect, right? So making sure that it is not inadvertently or inappropriately pulling out individuals that would be what we consider a protected class. So age, race, sex, religion, national origin, all of those things, okay? And kind of building on that, AI and employment decisions, right? A lot of times companies are using kind of a workflow system, an algorithm, to make employment decisions in hiring or in their performance evaluations, those sorts of things. With these automated systems, if you're using a vendor that has it built in, you need to look at what their checks and balances are with regard to employment decisions and making sure there is no algorithmic bias, okay? And that there's a policy, a procedure in place through that vendor. So that's kind of 25 in a roundup. Things that we are keeping our eyes peeled on in 2026. Let's go back to wage and hour. We do expect, and it's been chatter off and on, and if you remember in 25, 24, they were increasing the salary threshold, then in 25, they took it back to the 684 that it currently is. All of these things were being litigated. It will come back around, okay? So we can expect some sort of proposed regulation, again, to the Fair Labor Standards Act, the FLSA, the overtime threshold, okay? We're going to continue to see them fight out about the independent contractor definitions. We're going to see enforcement both on the federal basis as well as state basis for pay transparency enforcement. Some of these states, if you get caught by not posting, not talking about the wages associated for that role, there are penalties involved for that. So that's going to be a DOL primary focus on wage and hour right now. EEOC enforcement, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That is the agency that handles discrimination, harassment, whether it be Title VII, Family Medical Leave, Americans with Disabilities Act, all of the things, right? So the EEOC oftentimes will also work hand in hand with the Wage and Hour Division, right? So if Wage and Hour Division is auditing you and investigating you and they find something and then their interest is piqued because they start to see trending in your audit that white males are paid more than Hispanic females doing the exact same job, they can often tip off the EEOC. Okay. They always say, the agencies say, oh, we don't share information. They absolutely do. Okay. They absolutely do. So EEOC will continue to monitor and enforce particular areas that are what we call hot topics, right? So generally in charges of discrimination, I always tell my clients disability charges of discrimination are rapidly increasing, and they are often the hardest to defend. Why? Because in the eyes of the Department of Labor, pretty much everything can be accommodated, whether we like it or not, whether it is disruptive or not to our organization, it can be accommodated. It is a very high threshold to meet to justify and defend a quote unquote undue hardship. Okay. Every situation is very different. But they are significantly enforcing disability as a hot topic. Obviously, sexual harassment always remains top. And then the EEOC is also going to be looking at Equal Pay Act, Fair Pay Act, so systematic pay discrimination investigations as well. Again, it's always best practice. Please do annual harassment training, not just with your managers, but also with your employees. Yes, it needs to have the legal aspect in it, but also bring in relevant real-time aspects. Things that I regularly hear when I am assisting clients in internal investigations or doing regular training is we have to make it real life relevant, right? So certain terminology, buzzwords, bullying, retaliation, and knowing what the difference between those things are versus just, blatantly using it, flippantly using those terms. Because there is a legal threshold that has to be met. Just because it may not rise to the level of actual hostile work environment or discrimination does not mean that it is acceptable workplace behavior. It may be bullying, which is often confused with discrimination. But in order for it to be discrimination, it has to be tied back to protected class. If it's not, then it's bullying behavior, and we still have to address it and document it and stop that bad behavior. So also a reminder on EEOC enforcement, when it comes to charges of discrimination, federal threshold is 180 days for any individual, current, former employee, applicant for employment, to file a charge of discrimination. There are many, many states, especially up and down the East Coast throughout the South, that are what we call deferral states. Those deferral states allow for a charge of discrimination to be filed up to 300 days from the date of the last alleged incident. So paperwork needs to be clean, cut, policy, procedure, consistent across the board, so that a year from now, if you get an allegation that you terminated me because I'm pregnant and female, and I think it was discriminatory, but really my paperwork says and shows consistently that we didn't fire you because you were pregnant. We fired you because you damaged $10,000 worth of something at our property, or you had ongoing consistent attendance issues prior to notifying us of the pregnancy. And we did, verbal, written coaching, all of the things. You were on a PIP, so on and so forth. The only thing that you have to defend yourself will be the paper trail. So please make sure that those things are a primary focus as well. Let's talk a little bit about the National Labor Relations Board, okay, the NLRB. So unions, okay. There is a big push going on, not just in our general areas, but also nationwide, for more union activity. The tactics of labor unions in the past are very different for how they are targeting and connecting with today's workers. They're focusing more on social aspects. They're focusing more on relationship. with leaders and managers within the organization or lack thereof. They are connecting with them via means of social media instead of knocking on doors and making phone calls. So labor is a very unique area. Your policies and your employee handbooks need to be compliantly written to ensure compliance with the National Labor Relations Act, making sure that we're not using specific words, that we are not violating anybody's rights under Section 8A, which is basically what we call protected concerted activity. So as an employee, I can talk about wages, working conditions, my supervisor, benefits, all of that without fear of recourse or repercussion. We may not like what the employee is having to say. If they are at work and they're saying, you don't pay us fairly and this manager treats people poorly and vice versa, whatever it may be. You cannot, in policy and procedure or in day-to-day interaction with that employee, prohibit them from their rights underneath the National Labor Relations Act to engage in protected concerted activity. That also involves the ability to unionize. Okay. Many of us work in or operate a business in what we call a right to work state. Right to work is very different than at will. Often people try to use those terms interchangeably. They are very, very different. But we are seeing significant increase in representation cases filed with the NLRB, especially here in Virginia. I'm working on two right now, where a group of workers connected through Reddit, connected through social media, and started a campaign and then filed a case with the NLRB to have the union represent them. So you can get unionized just because we work historically or run a business historically in a non-union friendly state does not mean that the unions are not working behind the scenes. It is very, very important that you do leadership training. It is very important that we have good culture. We treat our people fairly. We're paying fair wages for the work that's being done. And that employees feel like they have a voice, a complaint procedure, and that management is being transparent and consistent and following up in communications and handling concerns. Okay. That is your front line of defense. When you treat your people well, there is no need for the union. Okay. So the other thing that I will tell you is that, especially here in Virginia, there is already legislation introduced to repeal right to work here in Virginia. There's some debate as to whether the incoming governor will in fact sign that legislation, because it is likely to get out of both chambers, the House and the Senate, and go to the governor's desk. Some people say yes, some people say no. But if right to work is repealed, then if your organization is unionized, then even if I don't want to join the union, and I am part of that group or what we call that bargaining unit of employees, I will be forced to join the union whether I want to or not. Okay. That's a big, big thing. It's big. So keep your eyes and ears peeled for wages, working conditions, safety, benefits, complaints. If you hear chatter, you hear, rumors of that, employees complaining about those things, that should pique your interest, that you may have some organizing going on behind the scenes. If that happens, you need to pick up the phone and call SESCO. We have an entire labor division that is dedicated, and honestly, that's primarily our history is in labor and union, because there are things that need to occur very rapidly based off of the changes in the NLRA. because you will have a campaign and a card check certification process within 10 days. So time is always of the essence if you think that there's potential union activity going on. Okay. OSHA initiatives that we are anticipating, that obviously if you were in certain industries, they are going to be reviewing, revising safety standards with emphasis on heat stress, ergonomics, mental health initiatives across various industries. So we are keeping our eyes and ears peeled on that. And then, of course, always your state and local trends. Remember that, yes, a state may implement certain regulatory changes, but it's not uncommon for even certain cities or counties within that state to have similar, if not more restrictive. We use Maryland as an example. Certain counties in Maryland require more generous paid leave policies than the state as a whole. Okay. So those are just some things that we're keeping eyes on for 26. Workplace trends, obviously, we're still dealing with hybrid work realities, whether that be work from home agreements, compliance issues, workers' comp issues, digital privacy, timekeeping, all of that. Certainly, there are many organizations that have required all workers to, return to the office. There are some industries that, remote work just doesn't work for that industry. That's okay. You kind of have to look at what works for your respective organization and the specific positions that you may consider a hybrid or fully remote work. It's always best practice if you are going to allow individuals to either do a flex or a hybrid work situation or a full remote work, that there is a very explicit telework agreement in place that gives you as the business some teeth into holding them accountable and checks and balances there. So with retention strategies, I actually just saw some numbers come out about unemployment rates being up in November. There's a lot of pressure on culture and retention. Still, COVID really did kind of push the needle on what workers are prioritizing and what workers are demanding from employers. And it's not just your Gen Zers. We're seeing this from Gen X, millennials, sometimes even baby boomers. There's a ton of different surveys out there, of course, that look at what employees really do value in the workplace, and they rank them slightly different, but the core 5 remains the same. So, flexibility, workplace balance, really, really take an opportunity to gain a pulse on the organization. We always strongly recommend doing a employee morale survey. Don't create your own, please. It needs to be statistically valid and reliable. But often, management can sometimes feel that employees value or want something that is not truly what employees value and want. So it's always best practice that every other year, every 3 years, you do an employee satisfaction survey to look at where are we doing well, because that's important, right? Where are areas of opportunity, and how do I work with somebody to kind of cultivate that organizational action plan? So talk to your employees. One of the biggest things for retention still is going to be relationship and connection with their supervisor and with their coworkers. Okay. Yes, wages, benefits, work-life balance is important, but the number one reason why employees still leave organizations is a lack of relationship. Person first, employee second. Generational shifts, Gen Z's expectations for being included, having transparency, receiving regular ongoing feedback. Those things are influencing their styles and their culture. And that is very different from how some other generations operate. So, every generation brings something really great to the table. That doesn't make one generation better or worse than the other. They're just different. So really looking at what is the makeup of our workforce, um, and tailoring our communication strategy, our styles, our connections to meet the various needs, right? There's a lot of performance management evolution, whether you're using an HRIS, or you're using a old school Word document. Either way is fine. There's no right or wrong there, but we're seeing a shift of employers moving away from just the annual review and doing more ongoing, real time accountability, coaching, crucial conversations. I have a lot of clients that actually have gone away from annual and they do them every quarter. And they're a modified version, a shorter version, but it helps to get people back on track in real time and have that accountability and to see that change versus, spending an hour together at the annual. Now, I'm a full proponent of there should never be any surprises when it comes to performance. If I, as a leader, have been doing my job and providing that ongoing feedback, that coaching, that counseling, that connection, then I've done my job. Okay. So looking at how do we modernize our performance systems to make it more frequent, more regular, because employees want that timely feedback. Obviously, well-being, burnout prevention, it's got to be embedded into your HR strategy. You've got to look at what type of wellness benefits that we offer. A lot of your medical benefits will have an EAP associated with that. That's great. 9 times out of 10, the employees don't even know it exists. So looking at different apps that you can, provide your employees. Some people are doing gym membership. Some people are doing yoga stuff, meditation, EAP, all of those things. But employee wellness really needs to be embedded into your HR strategy, not just from the HR policy, procedure, benefit side, but also in the day-to-day side, right? AI technology can make us work smarter, not harder. And how does that play into work-life balance, right? Burnout is real. Burnout is real. And you have to remember as well is that when we have burnout employees or there is not a balance within reason, a balance of work and employee support and well-being from leadership, that's when we see employees taking medical leave of absences, which, by the way, if it's stress or work related, could lead you to a workers' compensation claim. And then that's going to drive up your rates. So these are trends that we should be monitoring. HR priorities, AI tools, how we're going to use them, how we are going to have policy and procedure in place to mitigate any sort of bias or discrimination aspect. You should also have an AI policy in your employee handbook. We talked about pay transparency and equity and wage and hour compliance. Obviously, please do payroll audits. It's really important. You should also be looking at your wage structures. Strongly suggest doing a formalized comp plan. Why? Because I can also use it to defend any sort of allegation of pay inequity. So market wage surveys, should be doing internal job evaluation processes, setting appropriate ranges for the position that are defensible as to how and why we came up with these numbers. It is not uncommon for me when I'm working with clients to do comp work where obviously our newer employees are making the same, if not more, than some of our long-term employees in that exact same position. Whether that was due to recruitment challenges and we just paid out what we thought we could to get somebody in. Maybe that has been, we've been doing across the board adjustments without really tying it to pay for performance, or we just have been stagnant with some of our long-termers over the years. A lot of reasons. I see it in every organization. There will always be pay compression. What's important is that we work to modify and address that compression and equity issues. Why? To negate the liability as well. Okay. Really look and work with your bearing team. If you don't already have one, a health and mental health and wellness program, you can tie that into, depending on how it's structured, it could be voluntary, it could be participatory, but you can also tie in some incentives to reduce their premiums there. So that's going to be a big priority as well. Making sure that we're continuing to invest where we can in both leadership and development. It is really, really important to invest in your leaders. Having the right leaders in place can make or break your organization. Okay. So making sure that they are being trained on emotional intelligence, inclusion, accountability, communication, performance management, all of those things, right? And then also in building upon that, you're going to want to look at what other training and development opportunities can I provide to my non-supervisory staff. Remember, generations work differently. Your Gen Z generation is looking for growth and development, as are your millennials. Your Gen X's are, they're probably mid 40s to mid 50s. So they may still want to learn and grow and develop, but they're not as eager, perhaps, not all, but they may be less driven for that or demanding for that growth and development. So training and development should not only be for leadership, but you need to have training and development opportunities for your non-leaders within the organization. That also helps with cross-training, with career pathing, all of the things. And then I strongly suggest that you do some data-driven HR, looking at engagement. Again, that goes back to the satisfaction survey. You should be tracking your turnover. When companies come to me and they say, gosh, I can't keep, this type of position filled, it's just constant turnover. That's a red flag to me. Why? Is it wages? Is it benefits? Is it the leader? Is it the culture? There's a lot of reasons it can be high. Some of it is industry wide and some of it is position wide. And that's, we see that. But we should be tracking that data and making sure that we're using it to address areas of opportunity for the organization, but that we're ethically using that data as well. We're not using that as a cultural aspect against the employees. Okay. So some action steps for us as we kind of wrap up. Again, you need to revise your handbooks. You need to have those reviewed. If you are a banker's client, you can have SESCO review that for a very, very nominal fee. Again, federal law changes, state law changes. General rule of thumb is your handbook should be reviewed and updated no less than every other year, but best practice is every year. Okay. We want to make sure that those things are compliant. Do a wage and hour audit. Okay. And make sure that you are paying things correctly. Work on your manager training. Make sure that they understand the laws that they are bound to as a leader within the organization. Half of these managers don't know about Family Medical Leave Act or what to say when somebody, has a medical situation or what to do. They need to have fundamental understanding of basic HR employment law compliance, as well as the soft skills. That's going to help us minimize legal exposure. Do that wage and hour review. Again, SESCO can coordinate what those options might look like for you to receive a wage and hour audit. We'd be happy to talk to you about that. We are wage and hour experts. And actually, we're founded by wage and hour investigators back in 1945. So it is a primary focus of our work. look at your HR technology, your HRIS, your other systems, making sure it's, compliant, it's data driven, and we're not using biased AI decision making. And then, again, engagement retention strategies. How do I make my employees feel important? How do I make them feel like a person first, employee second? Recognition programs, training and development, career progression initiatives, tuition reimbursement, all of these things. You may have to get a little creative. Are the benefits that we're offering still meaningful? Or do they want other benefits that we can explore? Can't do that if we don't get the feedback from the employees. So those are some action items for you rolling into 2026. So lots upcoming with state regulatory changes, federal, we're going to keep our eyes on. Make sure that you're kind of working through some critical year-end task policy reviews, audits, planning for 2026, and, recruitment and retention aspects. And, just kind of think about strategically what we need to do and how can you partner with folks to stay ahead of all of the regulatory changes. The great thing about our relationship with Bearing Insurance is that SESCO regularly conducts these webinars, so we keep you informed of changes coming. But as Lauren said at the beginning, if some of you may have direct access to SESCO, if you don't, please reach out to your respective account manager or rep, and we can explore what that might look like and how you can gain access to SESCO. So I covered a lot in about 45 minutes. I'm going to see if there are any questions here. Lauren, do you? I'm just seeing some AI assistance.
Yeah, I don't see any questions. Please put any questions you all have in the chat and we'll answer them.
Sure. But in the meantime, again, feel free to reach out to SESCO. We can assist you with any employment related questions, whether it be compliance, training and development, policy, procedure, so on and so forth. So Lauren, I don't see anything.
Yeah, I don't.
Oh, wait, here we go. So 1099 is basically task focused rather than. Not sure we got the full question. A 1099, that's an independent contractor. Basically, I wouldn't say that it's task focused. They have to be offering a product or a service that no other employee is performing within your organization. They have to control their own time, how they do their work, when they do their work. They have to negotiate their own fees. They need to invoice you. There's a lot involved with actually being a 1099. So if you have questions specifically to 1099s that you'd like to dig into further, please feel free to reach out. Yes, this session was recorded. I believe Lauren will be posting this or sending you the link to the recording. I'd be happy to also include a copy of my PowerPoint.
Yes, I'll send out the link to the recording and the slides.
Good. Any other questions before we wrap up? I appreciate everybody's time this morning. Thank you so much. It's nice to see you all. Happy holidays. Happy New Year. And if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.